Hello and welcome to episode 257 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I've had 2 cups of coffee. Consider me high. This week, Texas is trying to give away money to build fossil fuel power plants, but there aren't any takers. Renewables have lowered electricity prices too much to make polluting the world profitable.
Viking Cruise Lines will launch its first zero-emission cruise ship next year. The hydrogen-powered ship is said to be unsinkable and impossible to blow up, so they named it the Titanic Hindenburg.
Delhi, one of the most polluted cities in the world, is having high-level talks to ban combustion vehicles. Now, if only the White House would install a carbon capture and sequestration system on the pollution coming out of the Truth Social website, we'd be good.
Salmon have returned to a U.S. river after 4 hydroelectric dams were removed. The salmon were thrilled to be able to swim upstream again. Just don't tell them about the nets and the fishing.
All that and more on this edition of The Clean Energy Show.
All right, so I have a trip coming up in a couple of weeks. I haven't mentioned it before. I'm going to go to the Turner Classic Movies Film Festival in Los Angeles.
Okay. I've never heard of it. Have I?
It's been going on about 20 years, and they show classic movies. It's from the Turner Classic Movie channel, and they run it, and they show a bunch of old movies. And there was some recent announcements. They're going to show 2 movies in VistaVision with VistaVision film projectors, which have not been used anywhere in decades. Like, this is a very niche kind of thing. And that was just announced. Keir Delay, the star of 2001: A Space Odyssey, he's 88 years old, and he's going to present 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Wow. That's impressive. He's only 88.
He's only 88. He's an old man in the film with old man makeup, and he essentially looks like that now.
Okay. That's too bad. I hate it when
people get old.
People from our pop culture die off or get old.
But anyway, you know, I'm a big fan of Jeopardy. Well, it turns out Ken Jennings, the host of Jeopardy, is going to present one of the films.
Really?
Yeah. I forget what it is. I'll report back because I'll probably go see it. So on the off chance I meet Ken Jennings, I've got a pitch for you, James. Okay. This is my pitch for Jeopardy to make the show more exciting, because everyone knows the worst part of Jeopardy is getting to know the contestants. Each of them has to tell a little story, a little anecdote from their lives. And, 90% of them are terrible and boring and whatever.
If you're
so
that
here's my
smart,
pitch.
you don't have an interesting life.
You don't have an interesting life. But anyway, if I happen to meet Ken Jennings, if I get to talk to him, here's my pitch. I think the stories should be worth points. So each of the contestants tells their story, and then the studio audience has a voting machine, and whoever has the best story, gets 1,000 points or something.
Well, that would bring a whole new level to the show. It'd be a bit of a reality show.
And, it'd be really make people up their game on those chit-chat stories.
Here's my pitch. You get an electric shock if you get the answer wrong. So I'd love to see nerds get shocked.
One of the events, Michelle Pfeiffer is going to get her footprints in cement in front of the TCL Chinese Theater.
Huh. Her footprint.
Yeah, footprints and handprints, whatever. That's a thing they do with celebrities.
Yeah, but they don't. That's different than. I was thinking of this yesterday. Like, that's different than the star, right?
Than the star, exactly.
The Chinese theater thing is full on. Do those footprints survive with water getting in them and not freezing because it's LA? But
Well, I'll report back because I'll definitely be seeing them because I'll be going to that theater.
Because they've been doing that for centuries, not centuries, but decades.
And I imagine they don't have room for all of them. Like, maybe they have to move them around or, replace some of them or whatever. But
all right, Brian, a few days ago, we recorded our Patreon episode for April, and I was excited about the film The Brutalist because it was highly acclaimed.
Yeah, we chatted about that briefly. I finally saw it. Shot in VistaVision. And like I said, they're going to show VistaVision film prints. And the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie is going to be shot in VistaVision, and he's going to make film prints of it.
Okay. But I was excited because you're an architecture fan, and you disappointed me. You know me, I like Academy Award nominated films. I'm one of the guys who does, and you're a curmudgeon who often
I'm a
doesn't.
snob. I hate them all, yeah.
Well, tell me, did you like The Brutalist?
No.
Ah, fudge! Yeah, of course we talked about some clean energy things too, but I was very disappointed. Very let down.
But you haven't seen it yet. You don't know. You might not like it.
Well, I still would have hoped, even if I hated it, I would have been pulling for you to like it. I'm happy for other people to like things. But
I really wanted to like it.
So, Brian, one thing that I mispredicted, I'm usually right about everything.
Yeah, your middle name is Nostradamus.
Sure. As far as you know, James N. Whittingham. One thing I mispredicted a few years ago was the penetration of EVs in the truck fleet. Like I thought as soon as EV truck fleets come out that there would be a large initial penetration of people, of companies, of cities. Like our city bought 2 of them.
Yeah.
Just 2 of them to test out and just to be green and to sort of signify things. Well, it hasn't worked out that way. And I asked Seth from Electrek, he's the chief publisher of Electrek, what he thought about this on his live stream last week.
I can't say for sure, but I imagine that there's a lot of fleet owners that just don't have faith in the range of electric vehicles over, we talk to Ford Pro quite a bit. They sell a lot of e-transits and F-150 Lightnings to companies. And when we talked to some of the fleet managers, they were I but they were like, we're not sure, how this is going to work in our world. So I think it takes them a little bit longer to get that confidence up.
Yeah. So he thinks that they're scared of them. I mean, if you're a fleet manager, you don't want to screw up.
Yeah.
But you also want to save the company money.
Yeah.
Which we figured would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for some fleets.
Yeah.
Which is significant.
You have to stop paying for gas or diesel. I mean, just the savings can be crazy.
And a lot of pickup trucks and fleets, they're not doing a lot of driving. You're not your guy with an RV trailer who's heading out on the highway.
Yeah.
Even if you're towing around the city and you're going back to the fleet center at night or the business.
Typically, yeah.
So I don't know. But my friend, or your friend, Dean in Calgary, he was looking at the Calgary Costco Facebook page, as some people do.
Yeah.
Some people are big Costco fans. And he saw an EV charger on there, and somebody was in Florida, I guess, from Calgary, and said, hey, look what they got in Florida. Hopefully come here. He was talking about how bad the comments were, saying, well, batteries won't last in our winters, and good luck replacing your battery. And to anyone who's maybe listening, who may be new to the show, who thinks you have to replace your battery, EVs have rechargeable batteries, Brian.
Yeah.
You don't have to go stock up on AA's every time you want to leave the house.
Yeah.
And you don't have to replace your battery. Usually there's always an 8-year warranty on the battery. And whenever there's a battery problem, it happens in that time frame.
Typically, yep.
I've seen very few cases, and a lot of those cases, the battery is not the whole battery. It's not one big giant D cell. It is a bunch of modules, which they can tell which ones are off.
Yeah.
And go find number 242, and it's the size of maybe a phone book or maybe a math textbook or whatever it is, and replace it, or a number of them if they have to. Yeah, I know that scares people, but and saying they won't last in our winters, what's going to happen to them?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
We've been driving them in the winter for years.
The fact that they felt they needed to comment, though, tells you something about how they're threatened by it and how they just don't understand. Another little note here, CATL, that's the world's largest battery maker. They're in China, of course, is reportedly looking to purchase a controlling stake in NEO Power's battery swapping unit. NEO is a car company, but they have NEO Power, which is their swapping part of their company. And we talked about battery swapping and how maybe it could be a thing.
Yeah, battery swapping. We just said you don't need to swap your batteries, but they do it on purpose as a way to quickly charge your car.
I can see some advantages in it. You don't, if you are wanting a 1,600 kilometer range car, which they are apparently making, why? I mean, unless you're an Uber, okay, there's, you can do 24-hour shift in a taxi or whatever. And even then, it wouldn't be that far. Maybe in very, very, very cold weather, it would be appropriate. But if you wanted to go on a trip, you swap to a larger battery. I really like that idea, keeping a reasonable size battery for 95% of your journeys. And then if you go on vacation or a trip, you just swap it out.
Yeah, so CATL seems to think that there is value in NEO's battery swapping.
Yeah, so they could be buying a controlling interest in it or a large interest in it, and that would help their business. And, it is interesting that they think, as the world's largest battery maker, that might be a thing. So just something I thought I'd throw out there. We'll perhaps follow up on that.
Okay, on to hydrogen cruise ships. So this is from...
Just setting the stage here.
Thank you. This from offshoreenergy.biz. And we talk about hydrogen occasionally. We talk about things like cruise ships occasionally. hydrogen doesn't seem to be really winning out as far as electric vehicles go. Hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are electric vehicles, but they have not really taken off. It doesn't seem like hydrogen cars can compete with EVs. It seems unlikely that that's going to go anywhere. But, we've always thought that maybe there is a place for hydrogen in certain applications, and cruise ships being one of them, where you need long haul, you need to go long distances, and big cruise ships are notoriously carbon intensive. I looked it up years ago because I was wondering, is there a lower carbon way for me to travel to Europe? And no, going on a ship actually uses more carbon than going in an airplane.
Which is remarkable, I think.
Remarkable, yeah. I mean, they're these floating cities that really have to, they're run on diesel power. So, it's a 7-day trip across the Atlantic. You're running a whole city powered off diesel for 7 days. It is very carbon intensive. So, yeah, I'm surprised it's coming this quickly, but, Viking Cruise Lines, they're going to have their first one next year. They've partnered with an Italian ship maker. This is going to be kind of a mid-sized ship. It's going to hold 998 passengers, 499 cabins. It's a 53,000-ton ship, 239 meters long, and it's designed to navigate and operate with zero emissions, featuring a hydrogen propulsion system that, combined with fuel cell technology, will be able to produce 6 megawatts of power, the shipbuilder said. And this is going to launch supposedly
that tells you something right there about how much power a ship needs. 6 megawatts.
Yeah, 6 megawatts
would power a small, town.
So yeah, this is supposed to launch by the end of 2026. And then they have another one in the works. The Viking Astria is scheduled for delivery in 2027. So, and they've signed a deal for 2 more of the cruise ships by 2031. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. It may turn out that shipping and cruise ships are the use that we need for hydrogen. Of course, the hydrogen has to be green hydrogen for it to be true zero emissions. A lot of hydrogen can be created by using things like natural gas, but green hydrogen created with clean energy like solar panels can make this truly zero emissions. But yeah, this is, this and air travel are going to be 2 of the things that are going to be difficult to decarbonize, but really good news. One of them coming by the end of next year. I thought that was remarkable.
Yeah. And I wonder what the economics are, because hydrogen may not be cheap right now. It might have to wait for it to be cheap.
But,
maybe there's more ports that they can go into, because some ports don't allow ships because, or because of the pollution. And maybe there's more touristy places they can go to. I'm wondering about how they make the hydrogen, and if they're making it at the port, if the ship goes to maybe a main port, and if they can fill the whole cruise up for that much, or what do they do if they run out of hydrogen? I don't know. I'm sure they'll be testing this for a while.
And of course, these ships are very large and very expensive to make. So it's not like they're going to be retiring their diesel ones anytime soon. So this is a very long and slow transition.
So you mentioned fuel cell technology, right?
Yeah.
So that means it's going to be electricity. They're going to have an electric motor propelling the ship. And I just wonder, I don't know, throw a few solar panels up. It's not going to do a great deal of stuff, but some ships it might. A container ship with a little lid on the top, which I've seen illustrated and designed in CAD. It seems possible that it would add something.
Yeah, it would make sense to do that. Who knows? And then another quick story here from Electrek. There's an electric ferry now in the port of Barcelona, and it has to make these kind of short passenger trips around the port of Barcelona. And the thing can run 21 hours on a charge. This is remarkable. It's not a huge ferry, can hold 84 passengers, but the ships are very short. The trips are like 15 minutes long. So yeah, the whole thing can run for 21 hours on a single charge. Again, that's good news for the shipping industry.
I think it's a more pleasant ride, and it's less stinky.
Yeah.
We were talking about electric boating and electric jet skis being less stinky for when you're enjoying nature at the lake.
Out at the lake, those jet skis, they're incredibly noisy, and then inevitably the fumes waft past you as well. It's terrible.
Yeah. It's not something you want if you're not enjoying the adrenaline rush of the actual thing. So that's good. I think they're getting one in Vancouver too, a passenger ferry, less electric.
Yeah, they're definitely working on that kind of stuff in BC.
And I think in Nordic countries, there's like an example or two of some car ferries, actual larger ferries. Too.
Yeah, larger ones that, they've got these big megawatt chargers at either end that can charge it fairly quickly. Because those ones don't run 21 hours on a charge.
Right. They don't. They only need to make a couple of trips before they have to absolutely charge, but they probably do it every stop. All right, Brian, this is the story about India's most polluted city, pretty much one of the most polluted cities in the world. And this is another example of one of my favorite things to do on the show, an oil ban.
Oil ban.
Now, Delhi government has announced some anti-pollution measures. Newly inducted BJP government has decided to stop providing petrol and diesel to vehicles older than 15 years at fuel stations in the city after the 31st day of March.
Yeah, they pushed that back a couple of weeks to April 15th, but Delhi is banning the refueling. I thought this was interesting because we haven't come across this one before.
Yeah.
This is new. They're banning the refueling of gas and diesel vehicles that are over 15 years old, as old as 15 years old. I think the diesel is 10. I'll get to that in a second. Because they pollute. And they prefer newer vehicles.
Yeah, and usually when we talk about these kinds of oil bans, it's really just banning the sale of new gas or diesel vehicles. That's going to be banned by a certain date in many places. In Norway, it's happening pretty much now. No more new sales, but they're not doing anything in Norway to force the older cars off the road. And as far as I know, this is the first instance I've heard of that.
I think it has to do with pollution. It's a real problem, and the government... The Delhi government, I don't know how politics works in India, but the local government promised recently on their election that they would do something about it. And people really want something done. Now, as we've said before, road transportation isn't actually a huge factor of all the pollution that is in Delhi. A lot of it is coming from dusty roads and construction and the burning of crops. Well, I don't see why they can't stop the burning of crops. I mean, if you can ban cars from filling up, can't you go to the countryside and say, no, put that fire out, no more burning of crops? But I don't know. The situation, I'm not there. But over 80% of gas stations are already fitted with devices to detect if a vehicle is 15 years old or more and will alert gas station attendants not to fill the vehicle. If they do, they will be fined. Diesel vehicles that have been on the road for 10 years after registration and petrol vehicles that have been on the road for 15 years are automatically deregistered. So if you have a car, as my son does, that's 22 years old, boom, it'll automatically no longer have a license plate on it. But then you have to ask yourself, why buy a combustion vehicle if you know you can't use it or if you can only use it for so long? It's going to lose value immediately, especially if you buy a 5-year-old car. Well, you've only got so much time left on that baby before it's gone. So overaged vehicles, if found parked in public places or on the road, are seized by the transport department and crushed like a tin can. The Delhi government has also introduced a policy offering incentives to owners of such vehicles for scrapping them. So you go out and you get an incentive. I don't know how great that is. But this is how the age of combustion vehicles ends, Brian. There is no economic reason to buy a combustion engine when they are banned outright. And they are also planned to roll out over 900 electric transit buses as part of a broader effort to replace 5,000 of the city's 7,500 buses with lower emission or zero-emission models of buses, all within this year. This year. You look at us, we got like a 30-year plan where we live.
Yeah.
Because you just go out and buy buses, but they're desperate because they can't freaking breathe.
Yeah. And this would bring pretty quick results, I would say, like the congestion zones that we talked about in New York and London makes a dramatic effect quickly.
But wait, there's more. High-level government discussions are taking place to ban combustion vehicles, the sale of combustion vehicles, as you just mentioned, in the capital by 2035. So you won't be able to register a combustion vehicle after 2035. So if you have a registration, I think that's okay. The nuances will be worked out, but you won't be able to sell it and then re-register it.
Yeah.
So that's going to really hit. Plans are being discussed to phase out pure diesel and petrol vehicles in Delhi. New vehicle registrations may be restricted to cleaner fuels soon, starting with buses by 2025 and eventually extending to all vehicles by 2035. Additional efforts include redeveloping roads to reduce dust pollution. Well, there you go. They're working on it. I don't know how hard that is to maybe have to pave roads that weren't paved, but it seems like worth it. Like you got to get that particulate matter down in your air. Anti-pollution guns are also going to be installed on new high-rises. And Brian, you might ask, what's an anti-pollution gun?
James, what's an anti-pollution gun?
Good question. Thank you for asking. It's a giant cannon-like thing that sprays out mist into the air. And I don't know. Apparently, it absorbs the particulate matter in the air and settles it to the ground. Okay. But it's very limited into its... But they're so desperate. This is an indication of how desperate they are. This has been going on for 10 years. It started in China, and it's been going on a little bit in India. Now they're going to build large buildings with the cannons built in. Wow. So it's just going to rain gobs of water, like gallons and gallons of water in mist in order to curtail pollution. So, yeah, I don't know. I've got a link if you want to read more about that. From 2030, new vehicles with internal combustion engines such as gas, diesel, and liquefied natural gas will be banned across the UK. Another oil ban.
Oil ban.
Well, this is an update to that oil ban because they've been moving it back and forth to our chagrin.
Yeah.
First it went to 30, then it went to 35. Now it's back to 30 again. Now they've got some nuance to it because of Trump's tariff war. From 2030, new vehicles with internal combustion engines will be banned across the UK, with sales of new hybrid vehicles will be banned not until 2035. So you can technically buy a combustion car in 2030, but it'll have to be a hybrid. So it'll have to be at least more fuel efficient than the non-hybrid version. But then that's only a 5-year period. Maybe you don't want to buy a hybrid, or maybe you do, because people will really desire them in 2035 who are addicted to gas. But secondhand ICE and hybrids will still be able to be bought and sold after these years, as they would in Canada and the United States, or California, pardon me, the ZEV states. The UK is going ahead with a partial ban in 2030, but they've done some softening due to Trump's tariff war.
The UK government has announced a relaxation of electric vehicle sales targets to help the car industry in the face of those trade tariffs from the US. Currently, at least 28% of cars sold by manufacturers in the UK must be electric vehicles. That will rise every year till 2030, when every petrol and diesel car sold will incur a fine. Well, amid mounting pressure from car makers, the government announced today fines would be reduced from £15,000 per car sold to £12,000.
So it's like a tax on a car. The fine is like a tax. If you could sell one, but you would have to add a lot of money. So maybe that's a nuance that we talked about. I don't know if that nuance has been discussed in Canada, for example, because I know a lot of people were freaking out about that, saying, how dare the government tell me what I cannot buy? But if you have there should be a tax on things that pollute, right? I mean, there should be, and there should be that's what Norway did, or, different countries have done that.
Yeah, well, we have things known as a sin tax. So things like cigarettes cost you more because it'll kill you and cost the health system a lot of money.
So after months of uncertainty, the government has confirmed that new hybrid vehicles can be sold in the UK until 2035, with smaller manufacturers and commercial vehicles able to escape the restrictions altogether. There's some, high-end sports car makers like Aston Martin. Is that one of them?
Probably.
And so they'll still be able, they only sell a handful of, $1 million cars or whatever.
Yeah.
So they're allowed because of that. But I don't know. Why would you want to buy a combustion car? If you tried it, you'll never go back. While the sale of new pure internal combustion engine vehicles will be banned from 2030, hybrids will be allowed on the road. As I said, from then on, only zero-emission vehicles, such as electric cars, are permitted. That's from autoexpress.co.uk.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye on that if they change their minds again.
Yeah, hopefully not.
All right, I went down a bit of a YouTube rabbit hole the other day, starting with the B1M YouTube channel, which we've talked about before, talked about it recently. They covered large engineering and construction projects, and those are often clean energy type projects, so that's why it's come up before on the show. But I started by watching a video. There's a hydroelectric dam in Switzerland that it's been there for many decades, and they're worried that it's cracking and it might fall apart. So they're building a whole second dam behind it rather than replace it immediately, because then you'd let all the water out. So they're building a whole second dam next to it, and then eventually they will let the water between them. So the gap between the two dams will be filled with water. And then eventually, if that old dam does crack and fall apart, there'll be this other dam to stand in the way of it. But that's why it's a great channel. Like,
can it take a sudden burst of water, though? I mean, I'm not a hydraulics engineer by any stretch, but I have
hopefully
questions.
it would happen slowly, if slowly crack apart. Who knows? But anyway, that led me to watch several other videos about dams and construction of dams and stuff in the U.S. And B1M had another video about a year ago. The Swiss one was about a year ago as well, about the Klamath River in the U.S. in Oregon. And about a year ago, they removed 4 hydroelectric dams that were on the same stretch of river. One of the cool things about hydroelectric dams is you can make more than one dam on the same river and essentially use the same water. It flows past one, you get power. It flows past 2, you get power. But these are quite small dams. So that was the other thing that I thought was interesting. There's apparently 2,200 hydroelectric dams in the U.S. So most of them are quite small. When we think of hydroelectric dams, we think of the Hoover Dam, these massive, massive projects that generate tons of power. But the actual reality is most of them are quite small. So these 4 dams that were on the Klamath River, they were all quite small hydroelectric dams. And they only contributed 2% of the power for that local utility. So, not a lot of power at all. And they lost a court case about the environmental impact of these dams. And they decided that the cheapest thing for them to do was just remove the dams, because there are other things you can do. So particularly with salmon. So this was the main problem on the Klamath River was
Like a fish elevator or something?
Yeah, they do things like fish elevators. I think we talked about it one time. There was a fish cannon. Like they'll actually have a vacuum tube and the salmon get to the mouth of the tube and they get sucked up and then shot above the dam. But they have things like, fish ladders is another way to get the fish around these dams. But because it wasn't actually contributing that much power to their grid, they thought the easiest thing to do was remove them. Now, of course, it's not easy. And so the B1M has a whole video about how to remove these dams. It's like an incredibly difficult process, and they've been there for 100 years. But then I started looking for more recent information because that video was from a year ago. And just this week, a video came out from Oregon Public Broadcasting about this thing. Like, it's only a year later, and the salmon and other fish and other wildlife are already starting to return. And it's quite a remarkable feat. Now, there's other things they have to do. The local tribes are working to, they essentially have to rewild some of these areas with, native plants and whatnot. So it's not an overnight fix, but after a year, quite a lot of the fish have already come back, and it's quite interesting. So we'll have a link for it in the show.
It was only a year that
it's only been a year since the dams have come down.
Oh, well, nature is resilient, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So the other issue is one of the reasons they put the dams up in the first place, and they put them up 100 years ago, was they were creating farmland for U.S. veterans coming back from the war back in like World War I and II. Veterans were given sort of homestead plots of land, and those farms, they essentially created them. They actually drained some lakes for this, and then they diverted water from these rivers, the same river, the Klamath River, to help irrigate these farmlands. And, that part at the time was quite a success. They created farms for all these veterans coming back from the war. That was great, but it was at the cost of the native tribes who were fishing the salmon, and they had treaties in place to protect their fishing rights. And so they're in the situation now where now removing the dams has starved the farmers of water. They're not getting the irrigation water that they used to get. So it's a very difficult, complicated problem. There is a link in your show notes to the whole. There's a 30-minute documentary from Oregon Public Broadcasting, and I pulled a little clip here.
No, I'm just gonna cry. Just cry it out for a while, My great uncle Joe Ball, he fished back home on our waterways for our chials, our salmon, but then it stopped.
No one left alive remembers salmon up here, chials, as we say. So these dams have been in for over 100 years. It was my great-grandfather's generation that opposed these dams going in. Our 1864 treaty says that we were entitled to the fish, and our ancestors took thousands of pounds of salmon out until the dams cut those off.
The dams came out because the utility Pacificorp had to find a way for salmon to swim past them, and removal was the cheaper option.
I view the salmon downriver, especially for the tribes, in no different than my own crops. So that's a Chinook.
That's a Chinook.
They're trying to catch their fish as part of their heritage. I want them to succeed as best as possible because their success is my success. If we can get the salmon to come back, maybe we can get a little bit of water security again, which would go a really long way.
So that documentary is on YouTube, is it?
It's on the Oregon Public Broadcasting website, and we can put a link to it there. But yeah, it's a really complicated issue because now these farmers are really suffering. They're not getting the water that they used to get. So the hope is that once the salmon come back and this gets more healthy, then they can start diverting some of that water back to the farmers. But they essentially promised the water to two different people. That, you know, the U.S. government at the time, they promised the water to these farmers so that they could have farms, but they had signed treaties to protect the fishing rights of the native people in the area. And for the last 100 years, the native people have been the ones who've lost. So it's quite a controversial topic in the area because what's happened to the farmers.
Well, maybe a beaver needs to come in and make everybody happy. I don't know. Coming up next, why it's the lightning round. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Brian, the Kremlin is working to minimize the impact of global oil price rout on Russia's economy as the nation's key export grade approaches just $50 a barrel. Uh-oh. Because you know what? That's like 30% of the government proceeds comes from oil, and it's down significantly. And so his support of Trump crashed the world economy and crashed oil and screwed him, bit him in the ass, you could say. Sorry, Putin. And that picture, Brian, that I have is the actual Kremlin spokesperson freaking out. Toyota now plans to launch 10 new EVs within the next 3 years. Brian Stockton, do you believe that? Your thoughts?
No, we've heard this before from Toyota. I mean, maybe 6 years, but 3 sounds ambitious.
Audi halts deliveries to the United States due to U.S. tariffs. That is a temporary pause. Some other people are doing that too. BYD sales, that's China, biggest automotive company in China, reached a new record in the United Kingdom with nearly 6,500 vehicles sold in March alone, a year-on-year jump of more than 750%.
Yes.
So you see that the combustion ban combining with some cheap Chinese imports, or competitively priced anyway in the UK. There you go. CS Fast Fact. Pakistan imported 22 gigawatts of solar panels in 2024, multiplying their solar capacity by 17 times in 1 year.
Wow.
And that is out of necessity. This is individuals and corporations and factories taking their power into their own hands when the grid is becoming more expensive and less reliable. Oh, it's another CES Fast Fact. Solar electricity generation worldwide has been doubling every 3 years. Not Pakistan levels, but it's been doubling every 3 years, and its growth isn't slowing. Brian, 2024 saw the fastest growth rate in 6 years. So it's going to run into some walls in some markets, but batteries are going to come to the rescue and allow that to expand further. Illinois is leading the charge in EV adoption in Q1. The first quarter of 2025, the state registered nearly 10,000 new electric vehicles, and that's a 50% jump compared to the same time last year. And that's 4 times the national growth rate of 12%, driven in part by a generous $4,000 state rebate for new EV purchases. A lot of other states have those. A few other states have those, and they've already done their big EV expansion with first-time adopters, early adopters. America's sketchiest televangelists are back for a final season on HBO. And guess what they're driving? Rivians. I don't know if you are familiar with the Righteous Gemstones at all.
No, this is an HBO show, I guess.
It's an HBO show, and John Goodman's in it, and some other comedy people. I like it. I watched it. It's demented.
My hands tied, Eli, with that whole Christian cruise ship thing.
You're a two-bit con man.
Every disease cured with ease by this blessed formula based on ancient scripture. 1 squirt of this, voila, No more COVID.
It's funny. It's stupid. I don't know if it's for everyone, but it is a televangelist family, and they're corrupt and horrible and weird, and they're now driving Rivians.
And why are they driving Rivians now?
It's a, thank you for asking. It's a deal with HBO. It's a product placement. Rivian's first product placement.
Okay.
Is an interesting choice for that. So, yeah, but they're always driving luxury vehicles, of course, because they're rich.
Yeah.
They're televangelists. BYD is launching its 6th car-carrying vessel. They're building their own ships to transport cars to other countries, which is, talk about vertical integration in your supply chain. That's the final step, pretty much. Authorities in China have started putting up signs at highway construction sites instructing drivers to deactivate automated driving assistance systems, or ADAS, following a tragic incident involving a Xiaomi vehicle. So now it's such, the technology is so predominant now, the self-driving, that they have to put up signs that say construction ahead, please turn it off, because we don't know how it's going to react on a highway. So world surpasses 40% clean power in 2024, driven by record rise in renewables, solar leading the charge. Wood Mackenzie, the consulting firm, has a report out that says a total of 101 out of 410 refineries around the world are at risk of getting shut down over the next decade.
I should hope so.
This number represented 21% of global refining capacity. Oh, would I be a happy camper if my local refinery shut down? I live next to the people who work there, but they don't seem to care what they breathe, but I do, and I don't want it, I wouldn't have to move then. Inflated operating costs of refineries, they're going up in price to operate them, are an especially important risk factor for future profitability, as well as their investments in decarbonization. They have to pollute less, so that's costing them money. And finally this week, there's a big energy experiment going on in Texas, and it's not going so well. The state put up $5 billion Texan dollars in public loans to help build new natural gas power plants, hoping it would boost electricity supply as demand keeps rising. But now, several of those projects are dropping out of the program. The plants that pulled out could have powered about 1 million homes that they were thinking of taking part in this program and powering 1 million homes, then they pulled out. Why are they backing out? Developers say even with cheap loans from the state, the projects are too expensive and too uncertain, especially with the cost of equipment and materials all over the place. Texas lawmakers pitched this fund as a way to jumpstart new gas plants, especially since solar and wind have become so cheap that it's harder for gas plants to turn a profit. The poor gas plants. Another bailout, another subsidy for them, but it didn't work because the economics that we talk about on this bloody podcast for 5 years show that it can't be done. So with projects falling apart, the plan might be working in a way they hoped, and that is a good news for the rest of us who like to live.
And that is our show for this week. You can contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We are Clean Energy Pod around social media. And please remember to follow us on your podcast app for new episodes every week.
And a huge thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for supporting our work. Thanks to Clean Club executive members Green Bastard and Brent Routley. Join our Patreon today as a paying member and get access to our exclusive Patreon episodes, like the one we recorded last week and all the other ones too, and other perks like ad-free episodes and just a general entitlement that no one has ever seen before in the history of the world. Join our Patreon today. We'll see you again in 1 week.
See you next week.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience and their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's Libsyn, ads.com today.